الملوك ذو التيجان من يمن وأين منهم أكاليل وتيجان.
It is said that the reason Shammar had left Yemen and went eastward was that the powerful king of Babylon built a colossal structure much like a ladder to ascend the heavens, just as Pharaoh and Haman had tried to do. And so Shammar took his army and marched towards the east to wage war against him. Shammar had defeated him and taken him prisoner in a caravan back to Yemen, where he imprisoned him in the depths of a well. Upon passing by, the daughter of Shammar heard the imprisoned Babylonian king pleading, crying and calling out for help, and she had felt some mercy towards him. As her heart softened concerning his plight, she was persistent in trying to intercede with her father on his behalf, until he released the downtrodden and lowly king from his prison and restored him to his rule over his land. He returned him with the agreement that he would pay yearly tribute to Yemen. When he reached the city of Sogd, he ordered that a slab of stone be brought to him. He inscribed on it in the language of Himyar, in the script we call Musnad. And so he wrote, "This is the king of the Arabs and non-Arabs, as he proudly declared himself. He who reaches thus far, then he is my equal, that whoever surpasses this place, then he is greater than me." Shammar marched his army to the city of Samarkand. After he decimated the city, he ordered his own people to have it rebuilt to stand once again. It is said that this is why it was named Samarkand, because it was Shammar who destroyed it. Thereafter he marched his army towards China. The Emperor of China was greatly afraid of him. He knew that he could not stand against him if the two armies were to meet on the battlefield. The Chinese emperor gathered his ministers to consult with them, and he said to them, "This Arab is headed our way, and I fear that we do not have the ability to defeat him, so what do you suggest we do?" And so each one of them brought forth their opinions, except one who had remained silent. The emperor turned to him and said, "So what do you say?" He replied to the emperor, "I suggest that you openly show your anger towards me, and that you sever my nose. Then seize my house, possessions, wealth, animals, and slaves. Make sure that everyone is aware of this." The emperor hated to do something like this because of the reverence he held for this particular minister. The minister was persistent with this idea until the emperor gave in and did what the minister had asked. Once word had spread of this deed, the minister fled China seeking Shammar and his army. When he encountered the army, he presented himself as a fugitive from China, fleeing the oppression of the emperor. Feeling sorry for him, Shammar brought him into his circle of elites as a trusted advisor. A terrible mistake. One that will be his downfall. The army needed a guide to show him the way to China through a great desolate land. The minister said, "I am that guide. You will not find anyone who knows this desolate land like I do." The army followed behind the minister, whilst he led them astray and towards their demise. The minister led them until they had reached a great distance into the desert, where they were faced with certain destruction. Their supplies exhausted, bodies broken, the heat baking their skin beneath their armor. Shammar exclaimed, "Where is the water?" The words barely escaping his parched lips. The minister retorted with delight, "There is no water here! Just death! You wanted to destroy us and our emperor, kill our men, and enslave our offspring. So I sacrificed myself for the people of my land. I saved them for destruction by myself. You and those with you are more deserving of being destroyed than our king and the people of our land." In his anger, Shammar ordered his execution. Certain of his own death, he ordered his army, "Go wherever you please." He then took an iron shield and used it for shade, and then took another shield to lay down on. At that point, he remembered that some of the astrologers announced upon his birth that he would die in a house made of iron with furniture made of iron. His army had disbanded and each went their own way. Most of them died in the desolate land. 30,000 of his army had found themselves in a land full of trees, water, and palm trees. It was the land of Tibet. They established their rule and resided therein. They were so far from Yemen and remained there until this day. Among them are those who resemble the Arabs in their mannerisms and behavior. They have their own kings who rule over them unencumbered by any other. They recognize their lineage to Yemen, and they love the Arabs quite intensely.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This story was recorded by Abeed, or Abeed ibn Sharia, or Sharyah al-Jurhumi. In this video, we will refer to him as Abeed rather than Abeed ibn Sharia. He was a Yemeni chronicler who lived during the time of Jahiliyyah, which was the period of pre-Islamic ignorance, and died in the year 67 Hijri, the equivalent of 687 in the Common Era, during the rule of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. His name was also reported to have been Umayr ibn Shubruma al-Jurhumi. However, what appears to be more correct is Abeed ibn Sharia al-Jurhumi. Ibn al-Kalbi said that he reportedly lived for 240 years or 300 years in some reports. The issue of Abeed's age, as reported, is not certain, as some cited that he was 300 and others 240 and even 150, which is more likely as stated by Abeed himself in his discussion with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan radiallahu anh. While it is difficult to confirm this, it's clear that he was amongst those who lived a long time and was recorded as being among the Mu'ammarin, meaning those who lived past 100 years. It was recorded that he was alive during Harb Dahis wa Ghabra, the war between the two tribes of Ghatafan, Abs, and Dhubian. That war started around 568 in the Common Era, meaning that he would have been well over 100 years at the time of his death. He had accepted Islam during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, but he was not a Sahabi. He was a Mukhadram, meaning that he was someone who accepted Islam during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but he did not meet him. There isn't sufficient evidence to indicate that he met or saw the Prophet ﷺ. Uncertainties about his age led some Orientalists to completely discredit and disregard the narratives of Abeed. One such example is how the German Orientalist Fritz Johann Heinrich Krankau wrote to Khairuddin Az-Zarikli saying that he believes that Abeed ibn Sharia was a fictional character dreamt up by Ishaq al-Nadim, and that the book is actually written by Ibn Ishaq. This was an idea that Az-Zarikli rejected. The claim that al-Nadim fictionalized Abeed as a historical figure is a dismissive and rejectionist viewpoint that is nothing short of an extremist approach to oral history. Many Orientalists approach history and narratives with a binary approach of either complete acceptance or rejection. With a little bit of research, it is evident that there are sources that are well documented before al-Nadim cited that spoke about Abid bin Sharia. A fact that was also evident to Krankau. Al-Jahith, who lived over a century before al-Nadim, also mentioned Abeed multiple times, as did Ibn Qutayba ad-Dinawari in his book A'lam Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and recorded portions of his interaction with Muawiyah radiallahu anh. Al-Madaini ibn Ishaq, Makhul, Abdul Malik ibn Hisham, Al-Himyari, Abu Ja'far al-Tabari, and others had all cited Abeed's accounts well before al-Nadim. Other Muslim historians like al-Mas'udi and al-Hamdani had also considered Abeed a reliable source, as well as the fact that they didn't doubt his existence, like Krankau did about 1,000 years later. Another Orientalist, Nabiya Abbott, exposed such flimsy arguments that were put forth by Krankau, such as his misreading of the introduction of the text, where he thought that the final narrator of the book, who lived in the 3rd century Hijri, was actually the author, and Abeed, who lived in the 1st century Hijri, was the final transmitter. Despite all these issues with Krenkau's understanding and approach to Abid bin Sharia and his work, he was still an editor for the Ottoman Da'irat al-Ma'arif publication of the book in Hyderabad that was published in 1347 Hijri based on 2 manuscripts. The subsequent publication in 1979 by the Center for Yemeni Studies and Research, led by Dr. Abdul Aziz al-Maqalih, did not add any criticism to Krenkau's approach. Abid was known for his knowledge of history of the tribes and kingdoms of Yemen. So based on the advice of Amr ibn al-As radiallahu an, the Khalifa Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan radiallahu an had summoned Abid ibn Sharia to have a lengthy discussion on history, which he ordered to be written down and documented in what would be one of the earliest written historical records of the Arabs after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This book was known as Kitab al-Muluk wa Akhbar al-Madin. What survives from the manuscript record in our time was published along with the book At-Tijan wa Muluk Himyar under the title Akhbar Abid ibn Sharia fi Akhbar al-Yemen wa Ash'ariha wa Ansabiha. It is based on 2 manuscripts, which were both written roughly around the same time period, just a few years apart, in the 11th century Hijri in Yemen. Within the discussion with Muawiyah radiallahu an, Abid bin Sharia tells the story of a Yemeni king named Shammar Yar'ush, or Yuhar'ish, or Yar'ush, ibn Ifriqis bin Abraha ibn Ar-Ra'ish. Shammar was nicknamed Yar'ush because he had a trembling disorder that caused him to constantly shake, likely the nerve disorder known as essential tremble. Many of these narratives match numerous other sources about the history and the stories of the Arab of the pre-Islamic era and the stories of the kings of Yemen. For instance, Ibn Qutaybah had also mentioned the story of the Yemenis and Tibet, except that he had ascribed it to Tubba' ibn al-Aqran ibn Shammar Yar'ush. However, while much of these stories were transmitted orally through poetry and other means, some of the narratives are reported from the people of the book, in other words, the Isra'iliyat, or they also may be from clear embellishments or other unverifiable sources. However, they all have a shared tradition among the Arab throughout history. Much of it, though, was preserved in the poetry of the pre-Islamic period. Abid tells Muawiyah radiallahu an, that the reason Samarkand is called Samarkand because in the Ajami language it was Shammar Qand, meaning Shammar Kharab, or destroyed. He made dua that Muawiyah radiallahu an is granted victory over Samarkand. Muawiyah radiallahu an found these stories amazing. He made dua that Allah shows him the truth of what he was saying. But the victory of Samarkand would only come later at the hands of Qutaybah ibn Muslim al-Bahili. The transmitter of the book annotates saying that it was reported by the Muhaddith al-Sha'bi that a man named Abdullah from one of the tribes of Hamdan said that when they were in the city of Sogd with Qutaybah ibn Muslim al-Bahili, that was around the time that they were victorious in Samarkand, they found a stone that was affixed to a door. And it had some inscriptions in a script that somewhat looked Arabic, but it wasn't Arabic text. He said, "By Allah, I think this writing belongs to some of the Himyari kings. Get a man from among them who knows the Himyari script." This man was Uthman ibn Abi Sa'id al-Haywani. He then stated that this man was able to read the script, and it was similar to what Abid had told Muawiyah radiallahu an. Despite the well-established nature of oral tradition among the Arabs, many Orientalists ignore or outright reject them because it simply does not fit a narrative that they like to tell about the history of Arabia and the Arabs. Some will disregard the authority of the Arabs in telling their own history as if these Orientalists were there to witness the history themselves. At any rate, that's a video for another day. However, look at how the scholars of the Arabs dealt with these narratives. None had ever doubted the existence of Abid bin Sharia because they didn't agree with some of his historical narratives. They didn't call it a mythology just because they didn't like what he had said. Ibn Qutaybah presents the perspective that the people of knowledge from among the Muslims take when it comes to some of the narratives of Abid bin Sharia. For instance, He comments about Abeed's narrative of the age of Nuh alayhi salam and his descendants and how long they had lived. And then he says, this is something that has long passed. Nothing has been reported about it from the book, meaning the Quran, or reliably transmitted from the Sunnah. It does not have a chain of narration. Rather, it is something narrated by Abid bin Sharia al-Jurhumi, and similar things were reported by the scholars of lineage. Basically, we approach these narratives as stories that were told and passed down by the Arab. The details of some of these narratives can neither be completely affirmed or rejected, except those that have a verifiable chain. Whether or not the story of Shammar's journey to the east is true, it was a fun story to tell. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een.